Okay. Welcome everyone to World Series News. It's Saturday morning here in Australia, and I've got some breaking news. Simon has contacted me from Florida, and he says we must get on. He's already been on a number of different programs over since we recorded just 24 hours ago, and this is very, very big news. And I want my viewers here in Australia to understand what is going on. This program was created to find the truth where the news was not being reported. You already know that. We broadcast yesterday the whole ivermectin announcement. I've got more to say about that. I'll do that in a subsequent show. Twitter is hot and raged at the moment. The anti-cookers, as it were, the establishment hacks, the hivies, the hive-minded set are out there and they're attacking all of us. So what we're going to do is we're going to play bigger and longer and stronger and explain exactly what is going on. All of us have been very concerned about what is this World War III scenario that is going on. Nuclear is on the tip of everyone's tongue who is actually observant and watching what is going on, and we are here putting the pieces together with actual news, actual reports. I'm going to bring Simon in right now. He's on the front foot today and he's got a lot to say. Let's get straight into it now. Simon, welcome back to the show.
Hello there, Jason. Thanks ever so much, and hello to your listening audience as well. And it indeed, even as we were recording last night, there was more information coming out. And then there's been a great deal more detail that I've been researching and speaking to some quite, senior people in various communities in order to verify some of this. So I'm going to run through it quickly for you. So last night, the American National Security Advisor, who's called Jake Sullivan, and is generally not regarded very highly because he was put into that position without a lot of foreign policy or national security experience. He gave a talk at a policy institute called the Near East Policy Institute in Washington, D.C. Okay. And he made two extraordinary announcements. One was that he was flying, and it's not clear whether he's flying to arrive on Saturday or he's flying overnight Saturday. He just said, I'm flying on Saturday, right, to the capital of Saudi Arabia to meet with the Crown Prince in Riyadh. Now, that was a bit out of the blue, considering that the director of the CIA had just been there recently and had a meeting that hadn't gone very well, and the talking points had been leaked to the Saudi Arabian press. So he's kind of like going back. But then what he also announced, which is even more curious, was that while he was there, he was also going to be meeting with the National Security Advisor of the United Arab Emirates. And the most extraordinary thing was he's going to be meeting with the National Security Advisor of India, who, as your audience will recall from the last show or the show before that, had just recently been meeting with this guy we're all now watching, Ali Shamkhani, the Secretary of the National Security Council in Iran.
Yes.
Indian bloke had been meeting the Iranian bloke just a few days ago. So, beginning of the week, he's meeting with Shamkhani.
Yep.
And now he's flying all the way back from New Delhi to go to Riyadh to meet the American National Security Advisor for like half a day or something. Now, I'm trying to get a handle on whether or not the Americans, are trying to persuade the Saudis, who host the permanent representatives of the Arab League in their capital, like Brussels hosts the seat of the European Commission, to put a kibosh on Syria rejoining, which there's more news about. But that might involve the UAE because they were the first country to re-establish relationships 2 or 3 years ago with the Assad regime. But that doesn't involve the Indians at all. There's no reason for the Indian National Security Advisor there. So it's almost looking like he told the Saudis, I want to come and see you, even though I'm not suggesting for a moment like they're afraid of him or they feel inferior in any way. It would appear that they've invited the UAE and the Indians so that collectively they can tell them, you don't understand, this is a new Middle East, it involves India, and this is the deal we've agreed.
Wow. Yeah.
And obviously, we'll know this by Sunday night, my time, Monday, your time, because I'm sure the Saudis are gonna leak it again. Now, the other thing that he said in this presentation that he gave at this policy institute, which really was quite shocking, was he said that the day before his speech, he had done like a Zoom or kind of video conference call with not only the national security advisor of Israel, which would be peer to peer, which would be logical, right, and normal, but that the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had also been involved in the call, and amazingly, he had made clear on the behalf of the United States government that the USA respected the Israeli freedom of action when it came to preventing Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon. Now, for people who are under the age of 45 or 50, that is very similar to what the US ambassador told Saddam Hussein in 1990 before he then invaded Kuwait and caused the first Gulf War. It's basically, go ahead, you've got carte blanche.
Right. Okay. So this is the significance of the statement of freedom of action. And when you're saying this is Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, fairly inexperienced, part of the Biden campaign. So this has got Biden's fingerprints all over it one way or another.
There's no way he would have said that on a pre-arranged video conference with the Prime Minister of Israel, unless it had been cleared with the US Joint Chiefs of Staff and the President and the Vice President and the Foreign Minister and the Defense Minister and all this kind of people. And because it was hidden in the speech, and everyone's focused on the Trump rape trial and the King Charles coronation, both of these comments were literally like one sentence paragraphs in like a one-page article that came out at 8:30 at night on a Thursday, simply saying the National Security Advisor gave a speech to this policy institute. But when you read the details, it was like, holy cow, Batman, that is really important times two.
Okay, Simon, so we're only doing a very short update today, and I just want to throw in a question now, and we can refer our viewers back to yesterday's program, and you can catch that on the World Series page, World Series news page, YouTube, Twitter as well, under the Jason Q Citizen banner. But the point is, yesterday we talked in great detail about what was happening with the Middle East, with a new agreement that you said looks kind of like a European Union in the Middle East that excludes Israel. This action now by Jake Sullivan, which almost happened straight after, or during, in fact, our recording yesterday. This is what we're talking about today. So it's like now Sullivan has gone, well, if all the Arab nations are joining forces, including Syria, trying to welcome Syria back into the Arab League, Israel is out on their own. Israel and the United States are like brothers in arms, literally. And so now we've got a situation where the NSA director is going to Netanyahu and saying, you have freedom of action to stop Iran in its nuclear weapons expansion or creation. And therefore, we're asking the question, are they there to A, block Syria in the Arab League, or B, to give Israel the go-ahead? And the term freedom of action is ominous because it looks exactly like what happened in the Gulf War some 30 odd years ago, Simon.
That's exactly correct. Now, in terms of blocking Syria, they need to do that desperately, because not only did the president of Iran have an extremely successful visit that we discussed in our previous show, but now the ambassadors to the Arab League, who are all resident in Saudi Arabia, which is where the host organization of the Arab League is based, they are going to have an emergency meeting on Saturday, Florida time, Sunday, Australia time, to discuss two issues: the situation in Sudan and Syria rejoining the Arab League. And then once all the ambassadors have tried to iron out the details, they will then consult with their home governments. And then all of the foreign ministers are flying in. And bear in mind that Saturday for them is like Sunday for Australia. I don't mean in terms of time zone. I mean in terms of, Sunday being a religious day of rest for the Israelis and for the Arabs. Saturday is their day of rest. So it's like an emergency meeting in London or in Sydney all-day Sunday, which would be unusual, right? So, and then on Sunday Cairo time, Monday morning Australia time, all of the foreign ministers are flying into Cairo, and they're trying to draw up a final set of terms and conditions for Syria to rejoin. And now they're talking about them joining not on the day of the head of government Arab League meeting on May the 19th, but actually joining before that, so that President Assad can come in as a full member and president of his country without any diplomatic slight to him. So they are bringing the process forward another few days. That's caught the Americans on the hop. It's very unusual for stuff to be done on an emergency basis like this, except when it's a situation like Sudan. Then people are dying, and you expect people to work on a Sunday. But you don't expect it when it's simply just signing some paperwork so that the president of Syria can go to a meeting in a couple of weeks' time. So they're obviously bending a lot of rules, making a lot of people work very hard this weekend in order to get that done, and get it done quickly before the Americans can really mobilize any significant resistance to it. So if we just blast through the last couple of points, because I know you've got other commitments and need to go on. The last two things that we need to cover are the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, has been invited by the President of France not only to go personally and stand on the balcony of the presidential palace or the reviewing platform, wherever they're going to stand, for the Bastille Day French Army parade to go before them on July the 4th, but he's actually invited a unit of the Indian Army to go with Modi and take part in the parade. Now, this has never, ever happened before. There may be some example like 1945 or something. Some of the Allied troops may have taken part at the end of the Second World War. I'd have to verify that. But all the Indian newspapers are saying this is unprecedented, and it's an enormous honor for India. Now, people need to remember that Macron seems to have embraced the Greater Eurasian Partnership. India is a big part of that. But the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting that took place over the last couple of days didn't go particularly well. There was a lot of friction between the Indians and the Pakistanis. That's normal. But the Chinese went there seeming to think that they would be greeted as, world heroes, having given the Americans a couple of good hard knocks. But they weren't really treated like that at all. So as well as this great French outreach, bearing in mind that France is the number 2 weapon supplier to India after the Russians, and then the Americans are third. The Chinese, in what appears to be a slight to the Indians, immediately flew to the capital of Pakistan, even though the Prime Minister wasn't there. He was at a meeting in England, and then obviously he'll be there, I believe, for the coronation. And they went straight to the President of Pakistan, the top guy, who in theory is non-executive. He's like the constitutional head, like the Queen of Denmark or the Queen of Holland. Okay? And they put out a long joint statement, which I've linked on my Twitter account, and I will connect to this broadcast so people can read that. Just the most incredible love fest, eternal friends, a relationship built out of solid rock, exchange of university students, cultural exchanges, language tuition. And the two huge points were that they identified that the top priority for both countries is this issue that I had raised with your viewers before, which was the China-Pakistan economic corridor in the form of this $58 billion railway going diagonally the length of Pakistan, which ends up at the new port of Gwadar that was specifically mentioned. So just like everything else that we're seeing in the Middle East, they literally are like jamming these projects that would normally take 10, 15 years. It's like full steam ahead. Nothing can stand in the way of this. and we need to do it on an emergency basis. And there, you've had the president of Pakistan issue a joint statement in writing with the Chinese foreign minister, Mr. Qin Gang. And what's significant is I think that as well as slighting the Indians, the Chinese were worried about a potential soon change of government, given the very, very difficult political situation in Pakistan. And by going to the constitutional president, who will still be the president even if the government collapses next week, that it gives them a strong hand when Mr. Imran Khan quite possibly becomes the next Pakistani prime minister, if not next week, then likely by the end of the year. That if they really are trying to get this project underway, they want to ensure that it's not affected by any change of political party being in power in Pakistan. They are taking the 10 or 20 year view on the benefits of the project, but they don't want to have any delays on getting it started. Now, I've been telling you and some of the listeners about keywords that we've been looking out for. So we've been looking out for strategic autonomy, strategic independence, the new era from China, the Greater Eurasian Partnership. Now, the phrase...
Whoops. Now, we may have lost Simon there. We'll just stand by for just a moment. Could be an interruption there in the in the call coming in from Florida. Simon, are you back?
Can you hear me now?
Got you back.
Great, excellent. It was a very temporary interruption, as opposed to the actions of the global conspiracy against us. So, not on this occasion anyway. And so, as I was saying, with the with the Chinese wanting to get this this deal done not only quickly, but so that they could reap the long-term benefit. And the word that they used today in the statement with the Pakistani president has also been popping up today and yesterday on all the bilateral statements that were being issued between, you know, the Indians and the Tajikis and the Pakistanis and the Russians and the Indians. There, even though there was a big group of them, they were all having one-on-one meetings on the sidelines over lunch and over dinner and over breakfast and all that kind of stuff, as often happens at a lot of these multilateral conferences. And the word to look out for is connectivity. Connectivity. And they're not talking about internet connectivity like you and I just experienced. They're talking about physical, hard roads and railways.
Yeah, wow. This is becoming it's a big deal. All of this, the distraction, as you said earlier, is the Trump and the court case with E.G. and Carroll. This particular rape case that matches the facts of the Law and Order episode. And Trump is with his depositions now coming out, videos of Trump being questioned about this on Twitter. It's got 736,000 tweets coming out today.
Do you know the worst thing that happened in that deposition, though? Did you read about it? The worst thing that happened is they showed him a photo of the woman who's made the allegations, and he thought it was his ex-wife.
That's
in the deposition. And this is having said, she's not my type. I would never touch her. So the response is, how did you confuse somebody that you say is ugly and you would never touch with your ex-wife?
Well, I guess Trump would say at that point, she is now my ex-wife. But that's not to make light of the situation. But it is interesting because when you look at the photos of E.G. and Carroll, she looks nothing like either Ivana Trump or Marla Maples. It's extraordinary. And I think he was married to Ivana back in those days.
Yeah, this was in the early 1990s. It's literally an allegation from 30 years ago.
Yeah, look, truly extraordinary. But as you said, this is a distraction. And the point is that the news that you've got now in under 20 minutes here on World Series News is all of the news that is deliberately not covered in the mainstream. And you get more in 20 minutes on World Series News than you'll probably get in 2 hours of the mainstream anywhere else, Simon. I'm thrilled and delighted that you're able to bring that to us today. We do have to cut off for all of our purposes, but it's truly extraordinary. We'll be back hopefully on Monday morning Australian time, Sunday evening in the US for further updates as they happen. And it seems, Simon, that there's certainly going to be a whole lot more coming with these urgent weekend actions. And I just want to make this last point before we go. Imran Khan, as you mentioned, is the former Pakistani cricket great who has already been elected as Prime Minister of Pakistan. He has been shot in the past and survived that. And Simon, as we talked about in the pre-production this morning, he's aged about 10 years and 3 months. He was the great playboy, the darling of cricket and all of this. And it seems with all the criminal charges that they're mustering against him, Pakistan has their own version of Trump in their midst, but they are also very fearful that he might be re-elected, and that can only really be a good thing for Pakistan, you would think.
Indeed, Jason. Well, I'll be very happy to speak with you in about 48 hours. And I'm absolutely certain that there will be a series of significant events on Saturday and Sunday, Middle East time.
Excellent. Well, you can get that news here on World Series News, and I'm very grateful for your likes, your shares, your follows, and all of the other things that you can do to bring people to understand what's going on. We have been following this for a very, very long time now, 7 or 8 years, in fact, in this process to get to where we are. We always wondered how it was that the establishment may become undone, but what we're seeing now is that the unipolar New World Order, one world government, is teetering because the great Eurasian partnership, Russia, China, Brazil, India, the BRICS nations, and all of the above, Saudi Arabia, are certainly creating a rearguard action. Thanks again, Simon, and we'll bring more news as it happens here on World Series News.